Welcome back to Meeke. We're going to talk to Tia Beasley in just a few moments, hear her incredible story of restoration. But first, we've got more time for you to have some take-home tips, compliments of Patty and Jason Ewan, who own Lasting Impressions Salon in Nettleton, Mississippi. Now, what can we do at home?
The one question I get asked a lot is how to achieve these loose wave curls at home. A lot of people come in and say, I see that look, how do I achieve that, how do I achieve that? The easiest way to achieve that at home is to get a section of hair. Doesn't matter how wide or how thin a section of hair. I usually just start around the front of the face. You want to get a curling iron about a 1 1/4 inch barrel. Put it into the hair, rolling back away from the face, keeping it up as close, and work those ends up into the iron. Let it set for a few seconds. When you drop it out, allow that to cool. It sets the curl in. If you disturb it while it's still warm, it's going to fall flat. It's not going to keep its body.
Oh, that's so great to know.
You allow that curl to kind of cool down some, and once it's cooled, you just kind of run your fingers through it, and it creates that loose.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, yeah. Kind of like I woke up with my hair like this look.
Right, right.
That is fantastic. I love that. Okay, what's next?
And then next, I'm going to show you how to achieve height into the crown of the hair. A lot of people's like, I don't like my hair flat to my head, but you know, the old-timey teased look.
Yes, because when you said teasing, you said, I'm going to show you how to tease. I thought, ooh, I don't know if we're still teasing, but you say there's a right and a wrong way to tease.
There is. You don't want to. I start with a section of hair right at the back of the crown, and usually I just kind of grab that up with a good teasing comb. You need at least about 3 rows of teeth because that helps pack that teasing in where you don't have to over tease.
Okay.
Then you just kind of start about 1.5 inches from the scalp and just kind of go back and forth right there at the scalp. No more than about that right there. Then throw that piece over, back it up with another section of hair in behind that. I've already pre-teased her hair some, so I'm having to get some of that out to show. But then you would come in behind that section, do the same thing, about 1.5 inches from the scalp, go back and forth. Now, the older way of teasing, you would go all the way up the strand.
Right, right. And it was just a regular comb. I've never seen a comb like this either.
So then you just, after you do that, you follow up by bringing that back over. Don't put the teeth back into your teasing because then you're going to just come right back out, but then just kind of bring that out. I like to just kind of barely fan over it. Smooth it with your hands. And it gives you that height on top without your hair just being flat to your head, but you don't look like you have...
It's not fried. It doesn't look like it's all damaged.
And it doesn't look frizzy or overdone.
Now, this teasing comb, can people just get that at a hair styling store, just anywhere, or do you have to be a stylist to get a comb like that?
We order these combs. We use them exclusively at our salon.
Oh.
We sell them at our salon. They are $10 per comb, but best investment you'll ever have. Every customer I have that has one swears by this comb.
If you want to transition into the 21st century and get teasing you can live with, then you want to visit Lasting Impressions. Thanks so much to Jason and Patty of Lasting Impressions. Go to Meeke.org, learn where they're located and their hours of operation. I'm so happy to have Tia Beasley in studio with me. Tia is 29 years old and unmarried, and refusing to settle for anything less than God's plan for her life. But as you're going to hear today, that hasn't always been her story. In fact, there have been some bumps and some things that you look back on and you say, Lord, you know, how did I find myself here? But today we're talking about your story because it's one of restoration, and it's one of the saving power of Jesus Christ and what he can do in the lives of those who love him and who submit to him. You know, one of the things I was drawn to, even as we were preparing for the show, we were talking about women and the different pressures we feel. As I got to know more about you and hear your story, I thought, in the body of Christ, we don't share our testimonies enough. There are people who are in bondage. There's all kinds of things that they're going through and struggling with, but they think that no one has ever gone through that. Or they think people can't possibly understand where I am, or they feel I'm so far gone, Jesus could never reach me. I've known too much, I've seen too much, and if I find myself here, I'm done. But that's not the truth. And in fact, we strengthen each other when we share our testimony. So I invited you to be my guest to talk about that process of restoration. And in order to get there, though, we're going to have to walk through a little bit of the valley, which I think is going to be a little bit uncomfortable because it makes you really vulnerable in sharing your testimony. But the good news is that as we walk through the valley, we come out to the mountaintop. so to speak, where the Lord reaches down and says, hey, I've paid a huge price for you, and you come to that realization. So let's start with your upbringing, because you have always been, as long as you can remember, exposed to the things of God and exposed to the Lord, right?
Absolutely. Well, first, thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
And as you spoke of, I've always been surrounded by the church. I was raised in a Methodist church. My mother was a praying woman, my grandmother. Being surrounded by the Bible and God and religion has always been the norm. It was not a choice to go to church on Sunday or Wednesday night. So, as you said, yes, I've always been in the church.
And so that shaped the way you grew up. You made a decision to follow Christ. Do you remember making that decision?
I've always had a very strong, I guess you would say, longing for the Spirit. And like even being in the Methodist church, I can remember saying, you know, it's more. It's so much more. It's like the relationship. I saw a lot of religion, but relationship was lacking in a lot of people around me lives, you know, and I knew it was more at a very young age. And so I started off being a leader. I was a leader in my church with the drama team. I was a leader in the teen group, and I was a leader actually of the Mississippi chapter of the Methodist teens.
So from early on, you were like gung-ho for the Lord. You were all in.
Yes.
You weren't interested in just playing church. You had a passion and a love for the Lord. And a lot of that, you told me, was shaped by your relationship with your mother. Just kind of watching your mom and seeing your mom never hid her relationship with the Lord from you. So tell me about that experience.
My mother was a devout Christian, prayed, go to church. She even taught me, I remember being very young and just beginning to almost talk, because she recorded it, teaching me how to pray in the Lord's Prayer, and we would all pray together. She raised 2 of my cousins, and we would all lay beside each other and pray together. So yes, watching her definitely shaped who I am. But within that, I think a lot in the African American community I could speak on, relationship was broken with males, females and males. So we would have the relationship with the Lord where we felt like it should be, but when it came to personal things in our lives, that was kind of off balance, I believe.
Yeah. Now, the last time you were here, you mentioned just in passing, even with the relationship with your father, you know, and I don't know, with respect to your mom, how much you want to dwell on it, but a lot of what we are exposed to as we grow up, it shapes our concept of God.
Right.
And it shapes our concept of relationships. And so you shared with me that your father and your mother were not married.
Right.
But that your father was still committed to you, and that they were still in a relationship.
Right.
So how does that shape your understanding of a family and what a family structure is?
You know, growing up, because I was surrounded by that, it was not uncommon. I didn't know anything other than that. And as I got in school and I saw other people in a married couple, and I knew the Bible talked about marriage, but it wasn't uncommon for me. But as I got older and realized what a relationship, how it's really supposed to be, it kind of made me see that is not exactly what God designed for us. You know?
And that it was a little bit out of context. And, you know, and one of the reasons, among many, Tia, that I wanted us to sit down and talk is because I believe that what you experience is the story of a lot of believers who love God, but our concepts have kind of been misshapen of what God requires and what is acceptable in the body of Christ because of what we see, you know? And so here you have your mother who really loves God, and you wouldn't have realized this as a kid, but she's kind of wrestling with righteousness and wrestling with this standard of living almost in front of your eyes, and you see this.
Right.
So how does that affect you as you're growing up?
I think it had a big effect on relationships for me, because relationships with, you know, men. Yes. For example. Because, like you said, she was struggling in a personal walk, you know. I guess you would say like I said, her faith was there with the Lord, but her relationship with my father was kind of unbalanced, and it made me grow up thinking like, okay, what are relationships all about? And it's kind of like my journey trying to figure that out was very up and down.
Yeah, we'll get to that. Yeah, because all of that has, I guess, major testimony,
Right.
such that it is. But now here's what I found unique in your story, and I almost found myself kind of going, oh, I wish I could have had that experience, because even though your parents were not married, you grew up with your dad. Your dad was involved in your life, was he not?
Yes.
And tell me about that. So tell me about how, because you were daddy's girl.
Absolutely. He was around all the time. He was at the house. Mainly he left when it was time to go to bed. You know, a lot of times we did family activities together. We traveled together. It felt almost like a normal home environment. But at nighttime, he went to his separate house and we stayed at her house. Well, at my mom's house. So.
And you never, I mean, that's all you knew. So you never thought there's something not quite right about this.
Not at a young age, I didn't. I think it was growing up, maybe high school, college.
Tell me about the point, and I don't know if you've ever even had this point. Was there ever a time where your mom was just dead level honest with you, or acknowledged sort of that pink elephant in the room? I'm sure that for a number of years you didn't talk about it. Was there ever a moment where she said, okay, we're not married, you know, or did that ever even happen?
No.
No,
never even happened.
It was one of those things, and that's also, even in the Black community, those taboos we just don't even talk about.
Right.
You know, because
Exactly.
you would imagine, I know what's going on, but we're not gonna discuss that.
Right.
Now, so fast forward, and a little bit of background as well. Your father was a dentist in the community, well known and involved in your life. And about 2 years ago,
Right.
2 years ago, he died suddenly in just this kind of like unexplainable car accident. Tell me about that, and tell me about how that affected you.
That was probably one of the hardest things I've ever gone through. My father, he went away to a game with his twin brother. And on the way back, I think it was storming really bad around the Alabama area, and he went off an embankment. But that was Sunday night, and he was supposed to return home, and I was going to his house, and he never returned. And we did not find his body till that Thursday.
Yeah.
And so it was a lot of unanswered questions, very hard. That was very difficult to experience.
Going through that, and you were on your way, you were studying to be a doctor.
Yes.
So you were working through all of that and going through all of that, and that had a huge effect on you getting into medical school and all of those things. But before we continue down that track, I want to rewind just a little bit.
Okay.
Because you went off to college. This is several years ago, obviously, before your father passed away. You went off to college, and you had made a lot of statements to the Lord about how you were going to live, and in fact, you know, leading these youth groups.
Yes.
And tell me about standing on the steps of the state capitol building and what happened.
Yeah.
There.
So as I spoke of earlier, I was president over the Mississippi chapter of the youth in the Methodist Church, and so we had a big conference, and it was about 4 of us from different churches that spoke on different things. Well, I spoke on abstinence, and I remember giving my testimony at that time, and I just, you know, maybe I was probably a junior or senior in high school. And so, to be honest, even back in that time, it was uncommon to still be a virgin in high school. And so I remember standing on the steps, and I told everyone, which was big for teenagers to say, I'm still a virgin, and I vow to stay a virgin until I'm married.
Yeah.
And I remember everyone clapping, and, you know, a lot of people made vows that day, and it was a big event, and it was a great moment at that time.
And then fast forward, you maintain your vow, and you are in a relationship. You have a boyfriend at this time, and you're still maintaining a level and a standard of purity in your relationship to keep that vow to the Lord. And take me to your transition into college and what happened there.
So going into college was a whole different world that I don't even think I was ready for. You know, in the church, you learn a lot, but it's almost like college is a different world. You're expected, it's kind of like, I guess, I can't say that you turn the cheek, you know, turn your face and not see it because you're in college and you're living and you're young, but in college it was just a different world. You didn't have that strong base that I had at home of like the Christians around me and we holding each other accountable. You're kind of with other college students who are drinking and partying and doing all the things that college students do. So I was thrown into that environment.
Unprepared.
And
so take me through that transition a little bit. How did Tia change once she set foot onto the college campus?
So about the first year, I was still going strong at it, you know, and I got surrounded by a group of friends who were a little bit more exposed than I was, and I started doing things. I think it was, to be honest, it was like a trick of the enemy. You do one little small thing, and that small thing kind of snowballs into something bigger. So you might go to a party. You begin to dress the way they dress. You begin to maybe take a little sip of what they're drinking on. You know, and one thing leads to another, and it became a snowball effect until I found myself not even knowing who I was anymore.
Not even recognizing the person that you were before you went to school. Now,
Right.
during this process, and and that's our testimony. That's what happens, because if there would be this huge jolt, we would snap out of it and say, "What am I doing?" But
Right.
really, it's that slow fade, that kind of like smooth footing progression
Absolutely.
into this lifestyle that you find yourself in. So during that process, do you have any, if you can recall, any of those Holy Spirit moments where you feel that conviction, or you have a sense of, okay, I know this isn't right? Is there is there a tug of, tell me about the tug of war.
The tug of war was there, absolutely. I would do things that I knew wasn't right, such as going to a party or maybe having a drink. I was never really the type that just got drunk, sloppy drunk, or the stories that you hear, but even just drinking a little bit that affected maybe the way I would normally think. And then you would get home and I would even just cry, and I would be like, what are you doing? But it never changed. At that time, I didn't have many people there, like I said, holding me accountable. It was just kind of like everybody's doing it.
Yeah.
I had my mother calling. She was calling and she was like, are you praying? She could feel, I think a mother can feel things. But of course she didn't tell her. Well, yeah,
Right.
I went to a party, I had a little drink. No. So
the reports were always good.
Right.
So it's like the letter from summer camp.
Right.
Everything's great and everything. And so those are what the phone calls were like.
Right.
Were there any Christians around you to sort of challenge you, or to be that kind of stake in the ground and say, hey, remember there's a standard here?
At the very beginning, no. But thank God, eventually, after my fall in college, I was surrounded by a wonderful group of Christian people that helped me get back to the level that I needed to be.
When we come back, we're going to talk about that fall, because you meet a guy, you're a freshman, he's a junior, and things really take a turn for the worse as far as your relationship with the Lord goes. We'll talk about that. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. Next time on Meeke. To make sure that it's drained and rinsed, and I've taken the liberty of doing that for you ahead of time, 1 can of kidney beans. When I talk about the plight of fatherhood, what is your opinion about what's happening in our country today? One man at his booth, an exhibitor, and he notices a Sri Lankan man, acting suspiciously.
I recommend a little of that. What's that spray you spray on every
Lysol.
doorknob? Lysol?
Yes.
Under the arms. I do a little of that behind the ears.